Mark. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up. Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak and sprang up and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately, he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Last Sunday, in the Gospel of Mark, section that precedes what we heard today, there was another time when Jesus asked a question, a similar question, "What do you wish me to do for you?" Today it's like, "What do you want me to do for you?" And last week, remember, it was James and John who approached Jesus, and they said, "We have something to ask you. And what is it? What do you wish me to do? What do you want me to do for you?" And they said, "Well, when you come into your glory, we want to be seated next to you, one at your right and one at your left." So they were looking for a place of prestige, a place of honor. And Jesus said, "You got to get through the test first." But they had a question of Jesus. He asked this question, "What do you want? What do you want me to do for you?" So today we have the same question. What do you want me to do for you? But the situation is different. And let's take a look at that. The man is blind. He's a beggar, which means he sits by the side of the road. He sits by the side of the road. And in those days, beggars were not allowed into the mainstream of the society, right? Whether it was the blind, whether it was the lame, whether it was the leper, they were all pushed off to the side. So he is there begging. God's asking for help so that he would eat or whatever, And then he said, "I'm hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth." He began to cry out and said, "Jesus, Son of David." So he calls Jesus by his name, that he is of the lineage of David, the great shepherd king. And born in the house of David. And he's looking for nothing more than, show mercy. Show mercy. And then people around were saying, "Quiet." And they rebuked him, telling him to be silent. "Stay where you are. You belong there. You're the margins of the society. You're out there." And Jesus stopped. And he said, "Call him." Now here's what I find, one of the pieces of this gospel that I find that's interesting. All right? The man is over there. Jesus is here. People are telling him to be quiet, stay in your place. And Jesus tells them, give him a message. Give him a message. Tell him to come to me. And this is what I find interesting. Jesus uses an imperfect community to get the word to the man that Jesus is calling. So it's not a perfect community. These are people who are telling the man to be quiet. These are telling him, stay in your place. These are people, who are rebuking him. But Jesus uses them to get the message to the man. And Jesus uses us to get the message out to people. With all of our imperfections, he's not looking for perfect people. Because the one, they wouldn't find any. And so, with all of our imperfections, he calls us and gives us the task, if you will, to get the word out, to spread the message. So then the man, they tell him, look, take courage and get up. Jesus is calling you. And the reaction of the man is he threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Now, in the early church, very early years of the church, when it was time for baptism, and it was adults, there is baptism of adults. And after the time of preparation, when they came to the church for the Easter Vigil, and then they entered, and before they made their profession of faith, they had to go into the water. So there was a pool. Not just a little thing, we have something there, but it was actually a pool where they could go in and be immersed. And so they would take off their old clothes, leave them behind, get into the pool, come out on the other side, and then, make the profession of faith, come out on the other side, and then the people are there to put on them a white garment that they put on Christ. So that whole symbolism of leaving behind your former way of life to enter into a new way of life. And this is what happens to the man, even though this predates the early church. But his cloak was all that he had. He probably would wrap himself in that at night to keep himself warm. But it says he threw it aside and he ran to Jesus. He sprang up. Jesus was calling him. So there was an excitement. And then, see, this is what the man had. This is what he had and he didn't have. What he didn't have was physical sight. It's clear, it says he was blind. What he had was the insight into who Jesus was. And there were others who were walking with Jesus who had the physical sight but didn't have the insight into Jesus' identity. But this man, Bartimaeus, knew who Jesus was when he called him the Son of David. He knew that he came from the lineage, the long line of David, the great shepherd king. And so he goes to Jesus. Jesus then asks him, what do you want? I want to see. But it was more than seeing. It was, I want to understand. I want to know. I want to know, I want to understand, and I want to be a disciple. So Jesus, it says, go your way. Your faith is saved you. But he doesn't go his way, because it says he received his sight and he followed Jesus on the way. So he made a decision after he met Jesus to go his own way or to go with Jesus. And he went with Jesus. And so that's a decision that he made. And that's a decision once he came to encounter Jesus. And that's a decision we make. And sometimes we make it on a daily basis in terms of what the choices that we make and what we choose to do and how we choose to live our lives. Our own way or the way that it would be close to Jesus. So there's that gospel piece, the man who encounters, the mercy. And in the first reading today, we had another example, I think, of who God is. These are people that have been in exile. They've been cut off from their lands. They've been cut off from their history. They've been cut off from their religious practices. These are the people who said in the Psalms, Patrick said to us, sing us a song. And they said, by the rivers of Babylon, we hung up our harps. How could we sing to the Lord in a foreign land? So these are the people that came to realize that the reason for exile was in part due to what they had not done. And they had not kept the covenant. They had been unfaithful. But there was a small group that were faithful. But anyway, what today is this homecoming, And the Lord is speaking, and the Lord is saying, shout it out, exult, proclaim your praise. I will bring them back from the land of the north. I will gather them. The mothers, the blind, the lame, the mothers and those with child. They departed in tears, but I will console them and guide them. I will lead them to springs of water. And it's very consistent. This passage from Jeremiah and the connection with how Jesus is with the man who is the beggar, who is left by the side of the road. And to remember, and I think in the book of Exodus, the very beginning, when the great story begins, and in the first conversation between God and Moses, and God says to Moses, and this is paraphrasing, I have heard the cries of my people. I have seen their tears. This is the God that Jesus was revealing to people in the way that he lived his life, and how he treated the beggar, how he treated the leper, how he treated the outcast, how he forgave the sinner. This is the God who hears the cries, who sees our tears. This is the God who says, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. This is the God who acts. This is the God of mercy, the God of forgiveness, the God of love. And so may we be grateful this morning in this liturgy that God has called us through other people, through other imperfect people, whether it be our parents, our grandparents, an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor, whomever. That's how we got here. Not through perfect people. As it says, God writes straight with crooked lines. And we're the crooked lines, and that God has called us to be the bearers of the message and the good news. So let the good news be that God is merciful, that God is loving, that God is kind.